By the fall of 1915, World War I was grinding into its second brutal year. The cheerful idea that it would all be over by Christmas was a distant, bitter memory. Now, there was only the grim reality of trench warfare, poison gas, and casualty lists that just kept growing. But away from the mud and blood of the battlefield, another equally vicious war was being fought. The war for public opinion. This was a battle of stories, of heroes and villains, of propaganda and martyrdom. And Germany, a nation that prided itself on cold, hard logic, was about to make one of the biggest psychological mistakes of the entire conflict. In 1915, the German command believed that executing a single nurse for treason was a simple act of military justice. They couldn't have been more wrong. This is the story of how that one act created a martyr, galvanized the Allied nations, and became the execution that changed World War I. Our story doesn't start on a battlefield, but on the quiet, tree-lined streets of Brussels. By August of 1914, the German army had invaded and occupied the Belgian capital. The city was thick with tension and suspicion. German warnings were plastered on walls, threatening dire consequences for anyone who dared to resist. For the people of Brussels, life under an occupying army became a masterclass in survival. This is where we meet Edith Cavell. She was a 49-year-old British nurse who ran the Berkendale Medical Institute, which was actually the first professional nursing school in all of Belgium. Born in a small English village, Edith was the daughter of a rector, and her life was guided by her deep Anglican faith and a fierce dedication to her work. She was a true pioneer who had almost single-handedly built Belgium's modern nursing profession from the ground up. She was known for being stern and serious, but that was just a reflection of the immense responsibility she felt for her patients and students. When the war first broke out, Edith was in England visiting her widowed mother. Most people would have stayed right there, safe from the chaos erupting across the channel. But Edith Cavell wasn't most people. She felt a profound sense of duty. Hearing that Germany was advancing into Belgium, she made the decision that would seal her fate. She told her friends, "At a time like this, I am more needed than ever," and went straight back to Brussels. When the city was occupied on August the 20th, 1914, her nursing school was immediately converted into a Red Cross hospital. In this terrifying new reality, her principles were all she had. She made it clear that every wounded soldier, whether British, French, or German, would get the exact same compassionate care. Her hospital became a small island of humanity in a world that seemed to have gone completely mad. Her personal motto was simple: "I can't stop while there are lives to be saved." For a little while, she managed to work in a bubble of professional neutrality, just a respected matron fixing the broken men the war kept sending her. But the war had other plans for her. In September 1914, only a month into the occupation, 2 wounded British soldiers stumbled their way to her hospital. They were trapped behind enemy lines and facing certain capture. Suddenly, Edith Cavell was facing a choice that went way beyond nursing. Helping them meant breaking German military law, but turning them away felt like betraying her own countrymen and her own conscience. For Cavell, it wasn't much of a choice. She treated their wounds and hid them in the hospital. That one decision was just the beginning. Soon, she became a key part of a huge underground network, helping Allied soldiers and young Belgian and French men, escape German-occupied Belgium. The goal was to get them to the neutral Netherlands, a short but incredibly dangerous journey. This network was a secret web of patriots, priests, and even aristocrats, like Prince Reginald de Croix, who hid men in his chateau. Cavell's hospital in Brussels became one of the most important safe houses in the entire system. She and her nurses would shelter soldiers, give them money, and connect them with guides who knew the secret paths across the border. They created fake IDs and disguised soldiers as regular civilians. The work was unbelievably dangerous. German patrols were everywhere, and the penalty for helping the enemy was death. Over the next 11 months, Edith's quiet world was turned upside down. By day, she was the respected matron of a Red Cross hospital, even treating German soldiers. But by night, she was a secret operative in an escape line, hiding their enemies in the very same building. It's estimated that she personally helped about 200 Allied soldiers escape to safety. She wasn't a spy. She was driven by patriotism and a deep-seated need to help. When someone asked her later why she took such insane risks, she just said, "Had I not helped, they would have been shot." Her operation was bold, but it couldn't last. The German secret police, the Politische Polizei, knew an escape line was active and they were closing in. They planted informants and started tracking anyone they suspected. Edith knew she was being watched. Her friends begged her to stop, to run to Holland herself while she still had the chance. She refused. There was still work to do. The end came on August 5th, 1915. Edith Cavell was betrayed by a French collaborator named Georges Gaston Quien, who had wormed his way into the network. She was arrested and thrown into Saint-Gilles prison. For 10 weeks, she was held in confinement, with the last 2 weeks in total isolation. Her German interrogators played a cruel psychological trick on her. They told her that her friends had already confessed to everything. They said if she made a full confession, she could save them. Edith hated lying, and she believed them. So she told them everything. She admitted to hiding British and French soldiers and helping them get to the Dutch border. Then she made a fatal mistake. She admitted that some of those soldiers had written to her from Britain to thank her for her help. This proved she wasn't just helping men escape. She was helping enemy soldiers get back to a country at war with Germany. Under paragraph 58 of the German military code, this was war treason. The penalty was death. On October 7, 1915, Cavell and 34 others were put on trial before a German court-martial. It was just a formality. Again, Cavell refused to lie or deny the charges. From the German point of view, the case was open and shut. This wasn't about punishing a nurse for being compassionate. This was about the law. An organization had been actively helping enemy combatants get back to the front lines. As the German Foreign Affairs Secretary would later put it, it was a pity that Miss Cavell had to be executed, but it was necessary. Consider what would happen to a state if it left crimes aimed at the safety of its armies to go unpunished because they were committed by women. The verdict came down on October 11th. Cavell and 4 others were sentenced to die. Brand Whitlock, the American minister in Brussels, and the Spanish minister, the Marquis de Villalobar, launched a frantic, last-ditch effort to save her. They begged for mercy, for a postponement, anything. They were ignored. The German military governor, General von Bissing, refused to step in. He worried that showing mercy to a woman would make German law look weak and would only encourage more resistance. The night before her execution, an Anglican chaplain named Reverend H. Sterling Gahan came to see her. He didn't find a broken, terrified woman. He found her perfectly calm. She told him, "I thank God for this 10 weeks quiet before this end." Life has always been hurried and full of difficulty. This time of rest has been a great mercy. They took Holy Communion together, and it was here she spoke the words that would make her immortal, a sentiment that rose above the raw nationalism of the war. Standing as I do in view of God and eternity, I realize that patriotism is not enough. I must have no hatred or bitterness towards anyone. In the early hours of October 12, 1915, Edith Cavell was taken to the National Shooting Range. There, next to another conspirator, Philippe Bock, she faced a German firing squad. The German army chaplain who was there said, "She was brave and bright to the last. She died like a heroine." The simple act of military justice was done. Germany had enforced its law, and in doing so, it had just handed the Allies the greatest propaganda victory of the war. The news of her execution didn't just leak, it exploded. Even though it was technically legal under the German military code at the time, the act of shooting a woman, a nurse, for helping soldiers escape just looked like pure, calculated brutality. The international outrage was immediate and overwhelming. Britain's propaganda bureau, Wellington House, knew exactly what they had on their hands. Here was the perfect story to prove everything the Allies wanted the world to believe about the Germans. It was the ultimate example of German frightfulness. They didn't have to make up atrocities. Germany had just served one up on a silver platter. Newspapers in Britain and America ran with sensational headlines. Her story was told and retold, often with lurid, completely made-up details. One popular myth claimed she fainted and was then shot in the head with a pistol by the commanding officer. This gruesome image was even drawn in the New York Tribune, pouring gasoline on the fire of public outrage. Edith Cavell was transformed. The quiet professional nurse became Brave Nurse Cavell, a saint and a martyr. She was their Joan of Arc. Her face was everywhere. Propaganda posters showed her as a calm, angelic figure, a symbol of innocence sacrificed to German militarism. And these posters weren't just art, they were weapons. In Britain, military recruitment numbers had been slumping. In the weeks after her death, they surged. Men who might have been on the fence now had an emotional reason to fight. They were told to sign up to avenge Edith Cavell. The impact was especially huge in the United States, which was still officially neutral. Along with the invasion of Belgium and the sinking of the Lusitania, the execution of Edith Cavell became the third strike against Germany. It created a clear pattern of brutality that made it harder and harder for America to stay out of the war, shifting public opinion from neutrality to moral outrage. Germany was completely blindsided by the reaction. They saw the execution as an internal legal matter, a necessary evil to stop resistance in an occupied country. They just couldn't grasp that in the court of global opinion this wasn't justice, it was barbarism. It confirmed everything the Allies has been saying about them. Germany's attempt to make an example of one woman backfired in the most spectacular way possible. Instead of crushing resistance, it created a timeless symbol of Allied resolve and German cruelty. And it fueled the determination to win the war, no matter what it took. After the war, Edith Cavell's body was brought home from Belgium to Great Britain. She was given a state memorial service at Westminster Abbey. an honor reserved for national heroes, before being laid to rest at Norwich Cathedral in her home county of Norfolk. Her legacy was quickly set in stone and bronze. Memorials popped up all over the world from London to Melbourne. The most famous one, near Trafalgar Square in London, is inscribed with her famous words, "Patriotism is not enough." I must have no hatred or bitterness towards anyone. It's a powerful quote. But it stands in stark contrast to how her memory was actually used. Another inscription on the very same statue reads, "For King and Country," a perfect example of how her universal message was repurposed for a nationalist cause. Her story never really went away. Films were made about her life, starting just a year after her death. Her name became shorthand for courage and sacrifice. In fact, her symbolism was so potent that when Adolf Hitler visited occupied Paris during World War II, he reportedly ordered 2 statues in the city to be destroyed. One was of a French general, the other was of Edith Cavell. In the grand scheme of the First World War, the death of one person among millions might seem small, but her execution had an impact that went far beyond a single loss of life. It was a turning point in the propaganda war that ran parallel to the fighting in the trenches. The German High Command thought they were just carrying out a sentence to maintain order. They were catastrophically wrong. They failed to see they weren't just executing a woman, they were creating a martyr. They gave their enemies the perfect symbol of German cruelty and Allied virtue, a story that inspired thousands to enlist and hardened the world's opinion against them. The execution of Edith Cavell didn't change the course of a single battle, but it completely changed the moral and psychological landscape of the war. It proved that sometimes public perception can be as powerful a weapon as any artillery shell. And it ensured that a quiet nurse from Norfolk, who only ever wanted to save lives, would be remembered forever as the woman whose death galvanized the world against the empire that killed her.